Well, I'm here with Seph. Thanks so much for joining in this conversation on the Upside Down People podcast. How are you going today?
I'm going great, man. Beautiful day. Always a good day to be alive and pumped to be on the podcast. I love having conversations and talking through stuff. So this is super exciting for me.
So good. Well, I'm so glad that you've carved out the time uh, to have this conversation. Maybe you can just by means of putting a bit of flesh to who you are for our listeners who may not really know who you are, share something that people may find surprising about you. And then also, what's your faith journey been like?
Yeah, things people might find surprising. This is really interesting because a lot of people don't know this. I'm actually born and raised Roman Catholic, um,
Right.
and still am practicing. So it's funny because a lot of people are like, wait, does that mean you're not Christian? It's like, no, I am Christian. Like, they are like different types of Christianity.
Yeah.
That's something people might find surprising, and that's actually kind of leads really well into my faith journey because I grew up, my family's awesome. I have amazing parents. I'm one of six, so bigger family,
Wow.
and we prayed together as a family. Like really, my parents were super intentional and like actually fostering a relationship with Jesus with us, like actually like praying and talking about things and all that type of thing, which sadly isn't always very typical, especially in the Catholic world. I think it's a lot of, go through the motions and do the right things, but I think a little
Right.
less emphasis on like the personal relationship with Jesus side of things. So my parents were just awesome and I grew up in that place, but I feel like everyone gets to the age where you kind of, if you were raised in the faith, you begin to question like, is this my thing or is this just my parents' thing? Like, is
Right.
this something that's really like I believe it fully, or have I just been doing it because it's what my parents have been saying? And so I think for me it was right around eighth grade where I really kind of began to start to ask some of those questions and say like, okay, like is this real? And as an eighth grader, you think you know everything. You're
Yeah.
like, oh,
Yeah.
it all figured out. I'm eighth grade. I can for sure, question all of these people that have, been studying this for years and whatever. But yeah, really kind of that's where I began to kind of question and really, I mean, where I landed in the way that I viewed God was him as a watchmaker. So like a watchmaker is somebody who creates the watch, sets it into motion, and just kind of lets it run. And every now and then they'll kind of come in and fix things up that need to be tweaked, but for the most part, like they're pretty much removed from the watch after they make it. And
Right.
I felt like that was God to me. Like he's somebody who created the universe. I believed that he was real. I just knew he was real. It made sense that he was real. I believe he created the universe, he set it into motion, and every now and then throughout history would kind of come in and intervene. But for the most part was pretty far off, removed, not personal.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so when you don't feel like you have God's attention, you feel like you have to try to get everyone else's. And so that was just
Yeah.
kind of a phase in my life where I was really trying to be the best at everything, trying to succeed in sports and school and music and all these different things. So I was like, I need to be like seen because I didn't feel like I could have that like that level of being seen by God. And so, but the more you get, the more you need. Like it doesn't actually satisfy you when you're trying to get attention from earthly people. And so
Mm.
I remember just kind of being tired, being weary from it, and being like this just feels exhausting. And just coming to prayer, I feel like for at least one of the first times in my life, like just actually with like a real open heart and being like, God, I hear this thing about personal relationship with you. I hear this thing about how like, John 10:10 that you have an abundant life for us.
Mm.
Like I want to experience that. I don't want to just hear about it, but not have any experiential knowledge of it. And I remember just going into prayer and opening the scripture, and I remember just coming with a sense of peace and
Mm.
joy that and like just rest and contentment that I hadn't felt in a long time. And I think from
That's
that moment on, it was like, this is it. Like this is the real deal. Like I actually do
so
believe that
good.
wants a relationship with me, that he actually, he desires that. And so my whole life since then has been, trying to share with people what I've found. That a relationship with Jesus is everything. And it is the source from of life that we get to live in. So that's kind of a brief summary of the faith
Yeah.
journey.
That's awesome. And obviously your music's like laced with that personable relationship that you have with Jesus. So what's your story with music then? How did you get involved in music and
Yeah.
yeah, where you find yourself today?
Yeah. So as a little 5-year-old, I watched a movie called Star Wars. And
That's
and I love
every musician's backstory.
right. It's always to do with Star Wars. I wanted to be a Jedi before I wanted to be a musician.
Right.
Uh, and I was so enamored with it. And um, we had a piano that up to that point I would kind of pound away on. My dad played music a little bit growing up, but I remember hearing the Star Wars theme, and I went to the piano as a little 5-year-old and like figured out how to play that
No
main
way.
theme. And so I was like, oh, this is so cool. And my parents were like, we should get you lessons. Like you just figure that out by ear. Like that was really impressive. So I ended up taking lessons. I took lessons for 5 years and just really kind of learned the classical piano thing. Stopped when I was 10, but still kept playing. At that point, it was a lot more of like, what kind of like playing music that I really enjoyed as opposed to just classical music.
Right.
So like, oh, hear this song, oh, I'm gonna figure out how to play it. I'm gonna learn it, all that kind of thing. So at that point, then kind of began to self-teach myself how to play like worship songs or how to play, Ed Sheeran songs or things like that. And then picked up guitar in high school, and same story, just kind of taught myself and figured out to play what I like to play. Around that time is when I really started kind of leading worship for the first time as well. So started worship leading, which was awesome. And then right out of high school, I ended up joining a ministry called Damascus here in Ohio, and
Okay.
it's really I began to worship lead a lot more, and that's really where I started to kind of songwrite. So started songwriting there, and a couple songs that I wrote like really seemed to resonate, so I got them recorded, and one of them that I recorded, I kind of sent it. I DM'd it to like a ton of people over
Yeah.
Instagram. Sent it to a ton of people over Instagram, like like I'm trying to think, like anyway, like some of the Bethel people, Hillsong people, people that are just
Did
like
you
big and
know these people or you just
met them before. I just sent them. I was basically like, hey, you're an inspiration to me. Here's this
wow.
song I just released. Like, I would love to hear what you think about it. Like that was kind of the general gist of it. So I sent it to like a ton of these people, and then also like I kind of stalked some people who some of these artists, and they would tag people they worked with in their labels, and I didn't really know what a label quite was or how to like what they even really did or how to contact them, but I'm like, oh, they're tagging a label, I should probably send it to the label. So I sent it. I sent my song just like, I mean, there's probably like 50, 60, DMs that I sent out, and two people responded. One of them was a guy named Phil Wickham.
Wow.
And so we got in touch that way, which is just crazy. And got his email, and we started talking a little bit. And then another was a guy named John Sell, who was working for one of the biggest record labels at the time called Capitol. And he was working there, and he's like, hey, this is really sweet. I like this. Like, let's talk. So we started talking, and then I came to town. That was early 2020, and so he's like, "Let's get you to Nashville. This is gonna be great." And then like literally 2 weeks later, COVID happened, and he's like, "All right, you're not coming to Nashville," you know. So it was kind of this waiting period, but we stayed in touch, and I would kind of send him different things I was working on throughout that year, and then later that year ended up coming to Nashville for the first time. He's like, "Dude, just come stay at my house. I'll set up some rides for you. It'll be great." So
Awesome.
started writing with some people there, and then just kind of came back, and more labels started hearing about me and getting interested. And then John ended up leaving the label and becoming my manager. And so, and yeah, then really just kind of was at that time working on a ton of music, ended up signing with the label, and then here I am today.
Man, that's what a story. During that time, when COVID happened, what was the thoughts going through your mind? Were you nervous or scared or anxious about like you've just got this huge open door, this
Yeah.
opportunity, and now COVID comes and ruins
Right.
a dream?
Dude, I feel like I was in such a good place with it. So
Awesome.
um, I had worked, so like I said earlier, I became joined this missionary program in the middle of nowhere, Ohio. And so it's a 2-year program, and it's a lot of running retreats, running events, like all these different things. Mostly at that time for middle schoolers and high schoolers. We kind of ventured to do more of like young adult retreats as well. Um,
Yeah.
but I feel like for so much of that, there's just so much character development and dying to yourself that happens.
Yeah.
You're on stage leading worship one moment, and the next moment you are counseling a group of middle school boys who just want to stay up till 2 a.m. making fart jokes, and then like you're cleaning toilets after they leave, like all the different things that just kind of really put your heart, I feel like, in a good place. And so at that point, 2020 came around. I just joined staff at this ministry. I was a worship coordinator there, kind of, which was like a brand new role, and just kind of helping coordinate some of the worship things. And I really enjoyed the job. I really enjoyed what I was doing. And so all of a sudden this opportunity comes up, and it was crazy, but also at the same time, I feel like there was a really like good level of surrender too in my heart of like, God, like if this is you, awesome. And if it's not, then I'm okay. Cause like I know your will is what's most important. And if you want it to happen, it's going to happen. And if not, then I'm going to be all right. So I feel like just like, I try to like hold things just like this, like in my
Wow.
hands, like stretched out. And if just like palms open, and it's like that allows me, if someone puts something in my hand, I can easily, I can hold on to it. But if they want to take it away, it's very easy for it to be taken away too.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I feel like that's kind of it was really exciting. I was like, this is crazy. And then all of a sudden, like, it's like, all right, full stop. But I was like, it was a really cool period where I think the Lord used it to just test my heart and be like, do you want me more than you want a record deal?
Wow.
And I was like, I think it should have been a lot harder than it was. But for me, I was like, all right, cool. If this happens, sweet. And if not, then I'm okay.
Yeah. I feel like it's a unique attitude to have, but I think it's the right one, holding things loosely and just that surrender to allowing God to sort of take the wheel.
Yeah.
Have you found anything particularly challenging as you've gained popularity and a larger following, and your music's like starting to blow up
Yeah.
even more?
I feel like the biggest challenge that I'm working through is learning how to say no and have balance. Because as things get bigger, so do the demands on your time, and all of a sudden, a lot of people are asking for you, and you needed to go do all these events, but then also you needed to come record more music, and then you needed to do this meeting and that meeting, and this, like, so many different things that just like place demands on your time. And really learning how to prioritize, say yes, say no to the right things is really, really key. Especially, I just got married in September,
Congratulations. That's awesome.
which is like right around the time where, that was like 2 months after Counting My Blessings came out. It was right
Yeah.
around the time it was starting to blow up. So it's been kind of wild, like the two things kind of coinciding. And then we have a baby due in December. So also like that's
Dude,
crazy.
congrats. Everything's happening.
So many things happening in this. I feel like I've lived like 5 lives and five years in the span of 1 year,
Yeah.
But yeah, so with all of those things, like time is just so important, and
Yeah.
and learning like, oh, that's a cool opportunity, but hey, that'd actually be, X amount of weekends in a row that I'd be gone, and that just actually is a lot for my wife, in my relationship, because we actually still need time together. And so like I think that's been one of the biggest challenges as things kind of it wasn't like, I feel like it wasn't as much of like a normal steady growth as a lot of other artists might have, where it kind of starts small and gradually gets big. I feel like it kind of started small and then jumped to big real quick.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's just been figuring out, like, in a smaller period of time, when all of a sudden it's like, oh, crazy increase of demand. Like, Lord, what are you wanting us to do? What boundaries are you wanting us to set? Where are you calling us to say yes and no? And how can we still like keep first things first in this,
Yeah. So I'm super curious. Like you're wearing a whole bunch of different hats: husband, father, musician, and like it's not just separate hats, but there's a lot happening in all of those as well. How have you learned to navigate the noise that's around and try and say like no to the right things and sort of hone into where God's leading?
Yeah. No, that's a really great question. I feel like so much of it is like learning. Like you just like you learn by making mistakes. Like you kind of like, oh crap, like I'm gonna be gone 9 weeks in a row. Like that's probably, I didn't even realize that. And then all of a sudden you look at the calendar, you're like, wow, that filled up fast without even realizing it. And then you're kind of like,
Yeah.
okay, next fall when, similar things are coming in, like how do we, like that wasn't good this year. How do we do that better next year? Um, but I think it really is like making sure obviously that God is number one priority. So am I actually having conversation with him about these things, or am I just doing it because it looks good or doesn't look good? So it's
Mm.
like, I actually want to pray about it and see, Lord, what's the most important thing here, and how do we do that? Um, with having a wife, like everything gets processed with her. Like I'm not making decisions on my own anymore. It's like, okay, we're together in this. We're a team. We need to, like,
Mm.
if we're committing to something, that's a sacrifice on both of our ends. It's a sacrifice for me to be gone and to travel, and it's a sacrifice for you not to have your husband here. And
Mm.
so, like, actually having those conversations together, and saying, Lord, like, this is something we're bringing to you. What works best for our family? Like, is this something you're calling us to do or not? And every yes also means a no somewhere else. That's kind of one of the
Right.
things too. So it's like, okay, I'm saying yes to a busy season of travel. That means I'm gonna have to say no maybe that next month to a lot of things because we need to rest and recover and, like, have a season where it's slower. So,
Mm.
like, we've been in a little crazier season. So and, like, next month, July, for us is like a lot slower. And it's like, okay, great, we're gonna, like, slow down here. So I think just really um there's grace for anything. There's grace for everything the Lord calls you to. And
Mm.
also, I'm like, oh, I'm in a place where I feel like there's not grace anymore. Then maybe I'm stepping outside of God's call in that. And I have to go back to Him and be like, God, am I still following what you have laid out for me?
Yeah, so good. And it's so true. Every opportunity you say yes to, or every choice you say yes to, it's a thousand no's. So
Yeah,
it makes a big difference. And that's could be a negative thing as well. You could say yes to one thing and then it's saying no to all these, like,
right,
family or friends or relationship, or even just time in that spent in that creative process for
right.
yourself.
Well, one of the
Yeah,
things that has been super helpful for us, in just keeping priorities priority, is having a Sabbath. Like,
awesome.
we read the book, Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John
Good
Mark
old
Comer.
John Mark Comer. I love
Yeah.
it.
And it was really impactful for me. I historically have always uh been on the side of, like, busy, 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 have to be moving the ball forward on things, have to be accomplishing things, all these different things. And my wife, like, has a lot higher value for, like, rest. And so it's been kind of fun to we read it during our engagement. And it was just a really
Nice.
good practice for us to, like, talk about things. And I've just found so much goodness and growth from having, like, an intentional Sabbath. And it
Yeah.
takes intentionality because a lot of times I will be traveling on a Sunday, which is
Mm.
typically Sabbath day. So then it's like, okay, great. Let's look at our week and let's see where can we take a Sabbath together and slow
Awesome.
down and be able to, like, just rest with the Lord, because I feel like that also just allows your heart to be more present throughout that week. You kind of have a moment where you can just, you know, stop, you can pause, and then, all of a sudden you're not, I've heard said, if the devil can't make you sin, he'll make you busy. Because I feel like
Yeah.
so often busyness, if you're not appropriately, taking steps to counter it, it can damage your relationship with God, because all of a sudden
Mm.
you're just so busy, busy, busy. You're not taking time to slow down and, like, recognize the presence of God and where He's moving in your life. So Sabbath has also just been a huge key for us in dealing with that, and, like, and learning how to just find the Lord in the day to day and make sure that, like, the priorities are the priorities.
That's brilliant. It's such a, yeah, beautiful thing to practice. And like you said, it's you need to be intentional about the Sabbath as well, because the culture that we're in. I'm in Australia. You're in the US.
Yeah.
The culture that we're in is a very commercialized. It's busy. Fill up your schedule. There's no such thing
Right.
as, like, lost time. You need to be productive. You need to be
Right.
performing. Um, so it's very countercultural to actually be intentional about slowing down, right?
Right.
So, yeah, and life doesn't get any less busy, right? You
Right.
get married, you start having
Oh
kids,
yeah.
your music career continues to develop, all these added things. So man, how good that you're getting into that rhythm right now.
Yeah, we're super great. I mean, it's been so cool. We've had so many amazing couples that we're close with who have, we're able to kind of look to and see and get wisdom from, and just, making sure we're intentionally checking in with each other on a week. Well, we do like a little nightly check-in, and then we have like a weekly check-in and a monthly check-in. And, just it helps us be able to be like, okay, here's where things are going well, here's where they're not going well, here's, hey, we didn't have a Sabbath that week, or hey, we didn't do this week. Like, just having that like kind of like I don't know, just those guidelines that allow us to really keep moving forward, keep loving each other, and keep helping each other, be the best that we're called to be is really, really awesome.
Yeah, beautiful. So you mentioned before how, yeah, Counting My Blessings was released around the time you got married, blew up,
Yeah.
and is still continuing to blow up as well. Why do you think it's resonated and impacted people the way it has?
I feel like um there is such a desire for thankfulness that's written into our hearts. And
Mm,
I think gratitude is something that every single person in the world can universally relate to. Like all of us can point to times that even every day that there's something we're grateful for, even in the midst
mm,
of trouble, of heartache, of whatever might be going on. There's always things that we can look to see like, oh, wow, that's a gift. Hey, that's a blessing. I'm grateful for that. I'm thankful for this. And so that, I feel like just that message has been
mm,
so um beautiful to like see how it's resonated with people because it is so just applicable. And I mean,
yeah,
I'll go on tour and I'll hear people come up afterwards to me. And it's funny because, the song is all about blessings, but more often than not, the testimonies of people who reach out to me or like who talk to me after shows or things, it's actually about them going through a heartache or like a trouble
mm,
or something that's going on. And this song was like a lifeline for them because it
well,
reminded them, even in the midst of that, there were so many things to be grateful for. I mean, I just literally 2 days ago heard like someone came up to me whose husband died a couple months ago, and
mm,
literally in middle-aged person, daughter with him, husband died, and just like in tears telling me how this song has just like helped her like see that, hey, he's in a better place. Hey, like he's still looking out for me. Like, hey, like God is still like good, and all these things are the reasons why. So I feel like it's so cool because,
mm,
on like even on social media, people are using it for, baby announcements, for wedding videos, for all sorts of things. Even just 2 days ago, there was Gal Gadot, the person who plays Wonder Woman in the
yeah,
Justice movies or whatever. She used it for like a birthday post for her husband. I'm like, this is crazy. Like
so
she's
good.
Jewish. Like she doesn't even like, believe in the same things. I mean, some of the things, but I don't even know if she's
Yeah,
practicing. All these different Hollywood people have like used this song, and it's like just this thing of gratitude that they can relate to. And then on the flip side, you're having, people who are in pain and suffering and whatever, also using it to
mm,
express like, hey, I know God is still good. So I feel like it is just this great reminder of, hey, there are so many things to be grateful for. And I feel like everyone needs that reminder, which is part of the reason
mm.
why this song has just, I think, exploded in the way it has, is just a very tangible reminder of those things.
Yeah, that's awesome. So true. And what would you say, like, where did the song come from for yourself, or what's the background of it?
Yeah. So, me and two other writers named Jonathan Gamble and Jordan Sapp were in a room together. And Jonathan Gamble, I mean, they're both crazy talented. And Jonathan came in with this, like, he basically came in with almost the entirety of the chorus. He's like, hey, I had this idea, God, I'm still counting my blood. Like, just brought that in. And all of us were like,
Yeah.
yeah, we're going to write that, you know? Um, but like, we start kind of talking about it because you don't want to just write something that like doesn't relate to you. But all of us were just
Right.
like talking about being in a season of like things we had prayed for and years ago. We were living in the answer to those prayers today. Like years ago we had prayed for this to happen in our job, or this to happen with like a record label, or this to happen with our families, or this to
Mm,
happen in our relationship with God. And like we were living in that. But so often we get sidetracked by looking at all the next things, all like what's coming up, what's next, what next dream, next goal, next whatever, which aren't bad
mm,
things, but we forget to actually in the moment pause and just thank God for what he's done. And so the
mm,
song really kind of then began to shape around that idea of like, let's just write a song that allows us to do that, to pause, to count our blessings, to like thank God.
mm.
And so that the song really flowed from that place of just like, hey, let's give the Lord this gift of like, hey, you're worthy of us pausing and just thanking you for all the things that you've done. And so the song, yeah, just kind of flowed from there.
Yeah, that's so good. And I think I'm sort of hearing a theme in terms of just that intentional pausing, intentional resting, intentional allowing yourself space to actually think, coming through in terms of just the conversation, what you're saying. And maybe perhaps that's why people have resonated with it as well, is because it does, like you're saying, allow you to intentionally reflect on your own life and see like, okay, where am I blessed in my life? Where does God's hand, where can I see it coming through? What can I put my hope in as well?
Right.
So it's that beautiful theme coming through. I love it.
Yeah.
What I'm curious to know your thoughts in terms of like music generally also plays a large role in people's emotions and affections
Yeah.
and how they relate to one another, and then also more importantly how we relate to God. Why do you think music impacts people's hearts the way it does so powerfully?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's so much, like there's even really cool science that comes out, that's all about like vibrations and frequencies, and like we're surrounded by music, and even like everything we see, like physical matter is vibrating, like there's like a frequency. There's like devices that you can like scan over images and you'll hear the frequency it's vibrating at. Like,
Oh, wow.
light, light is a certain frequency of sound waves as well. So like there's like everything around us isn't just light, it's also like sound, which is really neat that we're surrounded by music in our world today. And universe literally means one verse. Like it's like everything is musical around us. And you even think about heaven, right? What does the Bible tell us heaven's going to be like? It's going to be musical. Like
Yeah,
we're going to be singing night and day before the Lord. Like there's music constantly 24/7 happening in heaven. And so I, it's like this thing where for whatever reason, I'm not God, praise God. um and like I don't know why, but for whatever reason he created it so that music has power.
mm,
Like he likes it. I don't know why. I'll use this analogy when I teach people, like worship and like why we worship, and I'll talk about how my wife loves Earl Grey tea. It's like her favorite type of tea. She'll get it all the time. She'll make it daily. um I feel like Earl Grey tea tastes like the color gray. Like to me, it's like if gray had a taste, it would be Earl Grey. I don't. It was appropriately named. I'm like, why do people like that? I don't understand why it's so liked. But the reality is, my wife is loved by it, so I'm gonna make her Earl Grey tea, or I'm gonna buy her Earl Grey tea, or like I don't have to
brilliant.
understand it in order to give it. And I feel like music is similar. Like I don't understand why it has an impact, but it does. I don't know, understand why God, like all throughout scriptures, and you have the longest book in the Bible is the Psalms, which are literally were sung. It was music. Like I don't
Yeah.
get why so many times it says, sing to the Lord, lift your hands to the Lord, praise the Lord. We're like, I don't know why, but I do know that God made it that way. And so because I love God, I want to give it to him. And so I feel like there's just something in the way he designed us that music just has a power in. And I think people resonate. I know for myself, like I fell in love with music early on because I felt like it, for whatever reason, just spoke to a part of my soul that I don't know I had the words to fully express. And like the melodies and like the sounds, it allows you to just feel something that's so
Mm,
um that's different than what you can do just on words alone. Like
yeah.
there's a power behind it. And so I feel like when it comes to music, it connects to the heart. I feel like it kind of bypasses the brain a little bit and can get right to the heart. And I feel like that's why there's so much value in it, and why the Lord is like loved by it, and like that there's so much power in it. And on the flip side, it's super interesting. Lucifer, before he fell, was the head of the angelic choir.
Right.
Like he knows the power of music. And that's, I feel like, why he's distorted music in our world today so much, to where it's like he knows how powerful it is, so that's why he uses
Yeah.
it to move us away from God, to teach us values of the world instead of values of the kingdom, like all these different things, because like there's power in it. Like you don't counterfeit $1 bills, right? Like,
Yeah.
because you counterfeit fit the things that matter the most. So it's like, all right, we see actually the enemy using music to bring people away from God. That means it actually must be a really valuable thing that can bring people to God.
Yeah. I love that point that you're making. And one of the questions that I did have in my mind for you is that it's sort of a two-part question. One's how do you approach being explicitly, explicitly in the Christian genre of music in this current culture that we find ourselves? And then the second one, more related to what you're just saying, is like obviously it's so easy to get swept up in trends, or unhelpful narratives within our culture. Like you're saying, if Lucifer was he knows music through and through, so it's something easily a tool that he can easily use to distract and
Hmm.
distort something beautiful. So how do you prevent this from happening with yourself? Or is there like a litmus test that you can do for your own heart?
Yeah, right. Those are great questions. Hitting the first one. Remind me first
So
question.
first question was being explicitly a Christian artist. Yeah.
So I feel like for me, um, dude, it's so funny because I think you have this problem that can happen in our world today where you have Christian people who don't want to associate and be Christian artists, and as a result, I feel like they're trying to be cool with the world, and
Mm.
as a result, I feel like slowly the value can begin to compromise. Like it's kind of like, oh, I want to be like the world, so I'm not going to be as explicit about this. I'm going to kind of softball this, and
Mm.
slowly it kind of begins to the point where you're like, I don't even know this is Christian anymore.
Right.
And then on the flip side, you have like just very explicitly Christian things, but sometimes it's so in your face Christian that it has a trouble, like the world can't even relate to it anymore.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I feel like what I try to do is just be authentically me in everything. And so I'm not trying to hide anything, or I'm not trying to put on a persona. I'm trying to be the realist me that God has created me to be. And that is someone that is totally in love with Jesus. Like I don't have to try to like lowball um or like downplay my love for my wife. Like
Yeah.
that'd be that'd be unhealthy if I did. Where it's like,
Right.
yeah, she's all right. I kind of like her. But like she's it's cool. Like that's like red flags all over the place. But we do that with I feel like so often it's easy to do that with God, and we kind of like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I like Jesus. But like and then we kind of like have a but this like sort of thing
Mm.
with it, like kind of make it more accessible. I don't know. Like I feel like that's something that can happen in our world today. But I'm like, for me, I love Jesus, and so I'm going to talk about him. Like we talk about what
Awesome.
we love. So I don't want to downplay my relationship with Jesus, and I also love people. So I also don't want to downplay my relationship with people. And I feel like both of them can coexist. That I should love Jesus so much that it's evident that I am a Christian and I'm for him. Like nobody should ever have to question if I'm Christian or not. And at the same time, I should love people so much that it makes them question like, oh wow, he like loves people so much and he's relatable and he's fun and he's engaging and like there's these things about him that are actually really neat and he loves God. Like how like I haven't witnessed that, or maybe is that coming from God? Like I wanted to
Yeah.
ask to bring them to ask questions about my faith. And that's the cool thing about Counting My Blessings and how many people it's reached, because I'll have stories of people who aren't Christian who hear it, love the lyrics, love the words, follow me on social media, and are like, wait, you say things or you do things that I'm really interested by, and I'm really now interested in
Mm.
your faith. It kind of leads to one thing, but at no point in the process was it ever a question of, is he Christian? You know,
Right.
um, and so I feel like for me, like that's been kind of the cool thing about being an explicitly Christian person is I'm one of my favorite passages of all time is Romans 1:16. For I am not ashamed of the gospel. It is the power of Christ for the salvation of all who believe. And I just like
Mm.
I'm like I don't want to ever live ashamed of the gospel. And I want people to know, like, hey, I love the gospel of Jesus. It set me free and has the power to set you free. And I love that I can just explicitly say that and not compromise on that. And at the same time, as Christians, like we should be the most joyful, hope-filled people on the planet because of who we carry and because of what we hope for
Mm.
in heaven, right? And so
Very
that should
good.
cause people to be like, oh, I'm interested in this. Um, so I think that's kind of the cool thing about just being explicitly a Christian artist. And then,
Yeah.
that second part, or I don't know if you wanted to
Yeah.
say.
Oh, so yeah. I was just gonna say. So then, with the second part, like being in a culture that is secular,
Yeah,
and then also a culture that sort of tries to either distort the truths of God or just the example I'm thinking of is like how we find hope, we find joy in Jesus. The culture sort of sells the story that self-help is where we find our hope, where we find our joy. We look
right.
internally, and so it's like it's sort of like you read a self-help narrative and you're like, oh, that seems all right. Like it
Yeah,
seems like they want the best for people. But it's distorted something that is beautiful. So in terms of relating it to music, um, yeah, there's obviously cultural trends and things that try and uh, pressures that come that try and distract the the narrative or the story that you're trying to tell.
yeah,
How do you navigate that, or is there a litmus test that you can do in your heart to
yeah.
just make sure you're steering on the right path, if you know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah, totally. I feel like it's always well, one thing that's been, I think, the biggest lifeline for me is having a daily prayer life. Because
Awesome.
if I'm seeking God daily and actually carving out that intentional time with Him, like He loves to correct me, you know, in a good, healthy way. But like I genuinely believe I think every time I go into prayer, like God is challenging me or encouraging me,
Mm,
pruning me, because that's what He said He would do, and it's so good because it feels loving, it doesn't feel like, oh, I'm the worst and I can't keep, like, every time it's like, hey, like, you did that event and you actually weren't really that connected to me, or like, hey, you took up this decision but you didn't like talk to me about it, or like just like those little things, not in like a judgment or like a condemning sense, but just I feel like just having that daily prayer is a great way that God continually checks in on my heart, and I'm able to
brilliant.
very easily see, like, oh, I've stopped making it about Him and I've made it about me, or oh, I'm relying on myself and I'm not relying on Him. Like, I feel
Mm,
like just that daily prayer life has been so important to me, because every time I go into prayer, um, I should look a little bit more like Jesus afterwards, and because
mm,
that's the goal. Like, Jesus wants us to look like Him, to be united like more with Him. That's why He covered us with His blood. And so,
awesome.
just to be able to do that and like wanting to walk away more like Jesus is so helpful. And in that process, I feel like He gradually just begins, like, things of the world just begin to lose a lot more of their attractiveness.
Yeah.
Like, and or they'll bother me. Like, I'll be listening to a song and all of a sudden it'll bother me. And it didn't used to bother me,
Mm,
but it's like a secular song, and there's some questionable lyrics in it, nothing like too bad, but it's like all of a sudden I start to get bothered, and I'm like, that's the Holy Spirit prompting me that, like, actually probably shouldn't be listening to this or watching this or whatever it might be. Like, oh, there's just something about that. Not that it's like bad, like it's not like immoral to watch it or to listen to this, but it's like,
mm,
I feel like God's actually calling me to become more like Him in this place, and less like the world in this place. And so
awesome.
I think a big way that's continually applicable is social media. Like, social
Right.
media is such like a um, there's so many things you can say about social media.
Yeah. Let's get
And
into it.
and and it's like this thing where I feel like it's so hard to have a good balance with, especially as an
Right.
artist. And like, if I wasn't an artist and didn't like feel like I needed it for my job, I would probably try to just get rid of all of it, because there's so many dangers to it. There's so much distraction. It's the thing that will constantly distract me. It's a thing that I feel like pulls away from me talking to God more throughout the day. Like, there's so many
Yeah.
things about it, and I'm like, and so sometimes I'll take a week off or take a day off or take even longer off sometimes, like, just to like reconnect with God in that way. But that is like the lure of the world. It's like, oh, you need more likes, you need more posts, or that person got more people at their concert than you did, or you like all the different things that begin, like, the enemy uses that in so many ways. And so for me, I
Mm,
feel like social media is always something I'm processing with the Lord, because I feel like that's the area where I do get pulled mostly into the world's narrative without even realizing it. Like, all of a sudden I've been scrolling for however long and I'm like, I don't feel good. Like, I
right.
don't feel
Yeah.
connected. There are very few times, I could probably list them on one hand, where I left social media feeling better than I got on. You know what I mean? Like, we turn
Right.
to it for we turn to it for comfort, but I don't think any of us actually, after it's over, feel like, wow, I feel so comforted.
Yeah.
I think we feel more distracted. We feel more like there's like a deeper ache in our hearts. So I think just that's even something I'm continuing to work with, because it's like, all right, you got to post the things, you have to promote the things, you have to build a following. But what is the good balance there? And I think that's something I'm always continually trying to figure out and learn.
Yeah, I think that's something a lot of creatives are wrestling with, is that very question as well. That tension between self-promotion and then also this sort of device that is really hardwired to
Right.
suck your life out, to drain your
Yep.
attention, to say it in a very like negative way. But it's there to distract us, to gain our attention, take our attention off of what's around us. But then it's this necessary evil, like you're saying. So it's
Right.
I do sympathize with you and with that wrestle that you have to go through in terms of learning how it fits into your life and learning how you can be the master of it and not the
Right.
servant to it.
Right.
It's,
Totally.
yeah, it's a super fascinating conversation, that one. I'm also curious, have you had to, like, even with that social media thing, because I'm sure you'd come across critics or people that would like just sort of throw a spanner in the works. I don't know how you're wired, if you're like more inclined to people please and want to get recognition and affirmation. But how do you navigate feelings of self-doubt or that inner critic as you create your music?
Yeah. I feel like I was listening to this book, this audiobook the other day. It was called Courage to be Disliked. And it's a super interesting book, and it's really interesting the way it's framed too, because it's basically just conversations between like an older philosopher and like a younger philosopher about the meaning of life and how we can change all sorts of things. And I would say kind of the thesis point of it was really true freedom lies in the ability to be disliked. And I feel
Wow.
like that's just really, I mean, obviously true freedom lies in Jesus Christ. That there's more from
Yeah,
like
yeah,
a
yeah.
intellectual, philosophical
Yeah.
standpoint. But this real of like, and Jesus talked about that, like, hey, you're going to be like the world will hate you, like
Mm.
you're going to be persecuted, but like that, there's a freedom that comes from you doing what you know you're called to do, and not worrying what other people think about it. And I
Mm.
feel like I feel like more and more I'm just learning that, especially I think as I've become a husband, as a father, as like you really learn
Mm.
what's important and what's not. It's kind of like, hey, like I know I know I'm going to disappoint people. I know I'm gonna like some people are like not gonna like me for whatever reason. Like, you know, I know that I'm not gonna have that same, experience that this person had, or the same money that this person has, or lives in the same thing, what like all the different things. And it's like, that's okay. You know, like I'm learning the reality that Jesus really does. When you have Jesus, that's all you really need. And so
Mm.
learning to make things, um, like learning to create from a place um, of being seen by him and not trying to be seen by others is just like so
Beautiful.
important. I heard someone say once, like when they were writing a song, they felt like the Lord said, like, hey, if no one on earth heard this, but all of heaven sang it, would that be enough for you?
Mm.
And it's like that reality of like, I want to do what I want to do, because I don't want to create a fake version of me that then I have to uphold and maintain throughout my whole career, because I tried to people please and be like, oh, I'd rather do this, but this is what the people want, so I'm going to do that. Then all of a sudden I'm lying to myself every day. And
Mm.
that's gonna that's gonna take you out, man. Like that
Yeah.
that's gonna wreck you real quick when you have to lie to yourself every day, because you're like, I want to do this, but I can't because this is what people think. So I feel like more and more in my life I'm learning, it's okay for people to not like you. And not like in a mean way of like I'm gonna just be like an absolute like
Right.
rude guy, or like that's not at all what I'm saying. Like I'm saying
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you are called to live in the person that Jesus created you to be, and that person is going to maybe make some people dislike it, and that's okay. Like me
Yeah.
saying no to some events that people want me to go to is maybe some people might dislike that, but actually I know that that's like I'm doing that for my family and for myself. I can't say yes to everything, going back to that. Or
Yeah.
like, oh, people where they want me to make, this is total hypothetical, but like, let's say all my fans wanted me to make EDM music or rap music or something. And I'm like,
Right.
that's not me. And so like, you can dislike me for that, but I'm going to be who I'm called to be. And I'm not worried about like what other people like think when it comes to, if I'm genuinely following what the Lord is calling me to do, I'm not going to compromise that to try to please man. Because they say like if you live for them, you're gonna like if you what's the phrase? If you live for their approval, you'll die by their criticism or something along
Right.
the sense of that. So I think that's like really where just trying to like learning more and more how to be authentically me, and that might mean letting some people down in some ways, and that actually that's a sign of true freedom of me living in the reality of who God made me to be, that I'm looking more to please God and not to please man.
Brilliant. I love it. And I think that's a brilliant insight and perspective, that if we can like shift our attention to God, to look for our affirmation. It reminds me of I've just recently been going through uh, John Mark Comer's new book actually, and in it
Yeah.
he talks about he tells a story about like I think it's an old farmer or a peasant who goes into this Catholic church every single day, just sits in the pews for hours, and then the priest eventually asks him like, "What are you doing?" And he just like says with a smile on his face, like, "I'm looking at the Father God who's looking at me lovingly, and we enjoy each other," or something
Yeah.
along those lines.
Yeah.
And it's just that place that if we can reach that place of looking at God, realize He's looking back at us with love, with kindness, with all these emotions, that's all that really matters. Then
Yeah.
all these things of the world, the criticism or people wanting us to steer us with ulterior motives or wanting us to create EDM music, whatever it may be, it sort of drifts away. And it's like, oh,
Right.
I don't have to put that pressure on myself because his yoke is easy, his burden is light.
Yeah.
And it's just this place of rest, contentment, peace,
Right.
and love. I love it.
Because in that place, it's fear of man.
Right.
Like you get free of fear of man, and that's really what I'm saying is like we're supposed to have a fear of God, not fear of man. We should be more scared of we should have more of like a desire in our heart to not do anything that would damage our relationship with God. We should be more concerned with that than we should like what's going to damage my relationship with other people.
Yeah.
Like fear of man. I feel like there's such a huge problem with it in our world today. We're so scared of what other people think of us. We're so scared of how they may perceive us. We're so scared of all these things, and we stop to forget, or we don't forget, or we stop thinking about what does God think about this? What does God think
Yeah.
about me? All those things.
Yeah, I love it. Just one sort of last thought, obviously thinking about the future, what are you looking forward to, or what are you hopeful about in what lies
Yeah,
ahead for you?
I'm excited to be
Obviously
that.
being a I was gonna say, obviously being a father is gonna be a
Yeah,
huge one.
that's the biggest one.
Oh man,
It,
I can guarantee you that's one of the life's greatest joys. I became a father about 2 years ago for the first
amazing.
time, and such a beautiful privilege, and just to experience that gift that God just gives us and entrusts
Yeah,
in our hands is just so beautiful. But yeah,
yeah.
besides
So I'm
being a father,
excited for that. I think, dude, I'm excited. Um, I would say one of the things I'm really excited for is like touring, but specifically for the day when like I'll have my own tours.
awesome.
It's been a blast being with people, and I'm sure I will continue to love doing that. But I think just to be able to like design a tour experience, like a night experience that is just like to do whatever it is I feel called to do in that place,
Mm,
like to have prayer ministry, to be able to preach the gospel, to pray with people, to just worship the Lord, have fun. Like I love just creating an environment where people are feel welcomed and loved, in an environment where the Lord can just move. And so I think that's really one of the biggest things I'm excited for is just like, all right, what would a Seph Schlater tour look like? And, like just being able to design that in a way that's just all about bringing an encounter to Jesus is something that gets me really, really excited thinking about, because I think that's just like, I'm like, I want souls for Jesus, like that's
Yeah.
why I'm in. It's like, how do we do that? Let's go. Let's go all in. So that's really fun. I think I'm really excited also just for writing and releasing music. It's funny, like all the stuff that I've written or all the stuff that's come out so far were things that were written, 2+ years ago. Just
Right.
because of, the way like the slow pace of label land and things like that. And it just takes a little while. So I'm excited. I'm going to Nashville in July to record some new stuff, and I'm really excited about the new stuff that's coming out. I feel like it feels more current to where my heart is at, which is exciting.
Cool.
And just for all the things that God has been doing in me, just being able to release that. And so I'm really excited for those two things, just the touring side of it and the music side of it, are things that just really, really get me
Get you
like,
pumped.
let's go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love it. Well, yeah, hopefully when you design that tour, it's part of it's a world tour as well, and you can come
Yes,
across to the other side of the pond.
I want to, bro. I actually, funny story, in high school, I had someone ask me if I was Australian once because they said I looked Australian. I don't know
Yeah,
what that means, but
yeah.
and so I all throughout high school I would pretend that I was adopted from Australia, and I would get people to believe it. Like it was like this like running bit that went on for years, where like people are like, yeah, he's actually adopted from Australia, like whatever, and and
So
uh and then
good.
told people I wasn't, and then they're like, no, you're like. No, they didn't believe me that I wasn't. They were like telling me that, like, no, you are though. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm telling you, I'm not. They're like, no, you're lying to me. I'm like, no, I was lying to you. I'm telling you the
Yeah,
truth.
yeah, yeah. How
And it's
deep
like,
did you go into that? What was your
uh,
backstory?
bro,
Where did you come from?
I had a whole backstory. I had parent names. I had like, my parents were both musicians that met and then like had to give up the baby. Like all this difference. Like it was like actually
Oh
crazy.
man.
People are like, it's crazy. And then and so it was funny because I feel like people are like, remember when you used to pretend to be Australian? I'm like, I am Australian. So
Yeah, yeah.
I gotta actually go there so I can relive my fake glory days.
Exactly. Yeah, and maybe find out if your parents actually did come from you. Who knows?
Yeah, right. I did do
Yeah,
one of the genetic test things not too long ago, and I was really hoping that like there'd be some part of me that was Australian, and it didn't show up, so it
it
was really sad.
didn't. Yeah. Cool. Well, been so good chatting, Seth. Yeah, really enjoyed the conversation, your heart, and yeah, there's just a real sense of joy and hopefulness, and like that hopeful anticipation that God's gonna do a good work through the music that he's gifted you in and placed on your heart, and it's already impacted so many people. So I'm excited to see how he continues to work through you in this space. So
Thanks,
thanks
man.
so much for sharing openly and vulnerably, and yeah, just carving out the time in your insanely busy life at the moment.
Yeah, man. Well, thank you for having me. Like I said, I've been, praying about saying yes to things before I do it, and just definitely felt the Lord say yes to this, and so grateful for the ask and to be on and just share some things.
Awesome, bless it, brother.